Well, good evening, and thank you for your patience for our virtual viewers. My name is Kimberly Jackson, and I run the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, which is the gift of Congressman Bill Young. Tonight, we're doing a program about listening to kids. It's a passion of one of our moderator tonight, and we have an amazing panel. We're going to get started quickly because we want to make sure that we capture all of their genius for this evening. We're going to start with our moderator, and you have to please give me grace as I read their amazing backgrounds, and I know that you all don't want me to, but I don't have a choice because we are recording for our program. I know I'm going to get all their looks, and it's not nice when you have a bunch of judges looking at you like that, but it is what it is. So for Judge Sullivan, our former judge has a BS in journalism from Northwestern University. Her law degree is from Stetson University College of Law, and she practiced for 22 years. She was a circuit judge for Pinellas and Pasco County, and she served for 12 years until she retired. And she really didn't retire. As I noted, she's written 3 books about children, the last one being Born and Raised to Murder, a true story about a young man who unfortunately is now on death row. She is amazingly given to the community. She's a member of so many different organizations. She's an incredible mentor, and she has a wonderful family, including her 3 cats. Judge Jack Hellinger was appointed to the Circuit Bench in 2009 as a formerly assistant state attorney, 25 years in private practice, concentrated in criminal and family cases, and did his career in the family law division. He was a family division administrative judge for the 6th Circuit. Then we have Dr. Lisa Negrini, and she is the executive director of Learning Empowered, and she has over 30 years of experience in child and family and nonprofit leadership. She has decades of experience in this area with a ton of programs promoting integrated community systems and effective strategies. And she also co-wrote You Can't Raise Children by Text to help children communicate better. And then we have Ms. Hernandez, who is a Chicago native, also attended Northern Illinois University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Health and Human Services, 25 years of supporting historically under-resourced youth through nonprofit organizations, was with the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of McHenry County, relocated here and was the Community Engagement Manager for PACE Pinellas, and is now the Executive Director for PACE Center for Girls for Pinellas, active with volunteers, and is an active volunteer and volunteers with the Salvation Army, My Sister's Dress, and Habitat for Humanity. And of course, I have to take a breath because we still have more giants. April Lott is the president and CEO at Directions for Living, a non-for-profit child welfare and behavioral health program. Does comprehensive network of service promoting safe and stable families, and a leader in philosophy. And then we have colleague and Dynamo Judge Patrice Moore, who is with the Unified Family Court. She has a long career, and I will be brief with her because I know she will get me. The Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiatives, the Florida Youth Justice Commission, the Juvenile Justice Group. Of course, she is appointed by the Juvenile Welfare Board, Parenting Coordinator Review Board, Steering Committee on Families and Children in Court, and the Florida Board of Psychology. Her service is included to our county and Assistant Public Defender for 14 years. And she attended Florida Memorial University and Stetson University College of Law. Tried to do that fast. I have one more, Bill Walker. And he has his BA from the University of Miami, probation and parole officer for many years, doctorate from Stetson University College of Law, editor-in-chief there, assistant state attorney for the 6th Circuit, president of the St. Petersburg Bar, and the foundation. So now you know who you're about to listen to, so it's like the greatest of all times get together and get to have a conversation. So thank you all for your time tonight. If you have any questions, we're happy to serve.
Okay.
Yeah, take it away.
Thank you, Kim. Well, we have an all-star panel tonight, and we don't have much time to get in all their expertise, so I'm just going to shoot right away with some questions for all of them, okay? Judge Hellinger, okay, you'll be first. How do you approach family law cases involving children? And what role does therapeutic justice play in creating a better outcome for kids?
Very glad to be here. 24 years ago, the Florida Supreme Court came out with a case like no other case in the history of Florida, and it hadn't been one since. And it basically outlined the model family court for family court in the state of Florida. And what it did was change the whole trajectory of how family court, and I say that in the broad definition, not just divorces, paternities, but all juvenile matters, protective injunctions, adoptions, all those kind of things. And what it tried to do is redirect the court system away from a litigation. We all think courts and everybody goes to trial. And what we learned in family law is that most of the time, particularly if there are children, going to trial is the worst thing in the world for the family. Why? Because it becomes an attack of one parent against the other, and then the other parent back, and then the government, meaning a judge, decides the children's future. And it's just not, in most cases, the best way to help families get to a better place. So I brought for everybody, I think you have here, something called the guiding principles. At the bottom of that is the case citation from the case in 2001 that the Florida Supreme Court handled. And we talk about therapeutic justice if you want to take a quick look at the fifth guiding principle. And that describes what therapeutic justice is and what we try very, very, very hard to do in the family arena. And that is, instead of just turning to litigation, to try to help this family get to a better place. By listening to them, by understanding their issues, by trying to provide resources from them to get to a better place so that when they leave the court system, they're in a much better place than when they entered the system. So when you have a chance, take a look and read Therapeutic Justice. I'm a huge believer in it. I try to do it day in and day out.
Okay, thank you, Judge. And I know that Dr. Negrini and you have traveled the state talking about adverse childhood experiences and your recommendations for therapeutic justice. So I'm going to let Dr. Negrini now answer how you can explain the impact of adverse childhood experiences, what it is, and how it impacts kids.
So ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, have been heavily researched over the last 30 years. And what we know is that traumatic and life stressors lead to future physical health, mental health, and behavioral consequences all through life. So for children and in adulthood. And so what are the ACEs? Physical, emotional, sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, households where there's domestic violence, substance use, mental illness, incarceration, or parental separation or divorce. And what we know is that our kids in foster care have multiple ACEs. They don't just have the ACE of separation from family and from parents and from caregivers, but everything that led up to that separation. So what were they exposed to in their households, and how do those ACEs stack up? We know that the more ACEs a child has, the bigger the propensity for that child to die by suicide, to die by heart attack, diabetes, all cancer. We know that the physical predicaments that we find ourselves in later in life are connected to our early experiences. And so, what does that mean? We know kids are resilient. Kids are survivors. If we're there to help repair, to help kids be able to heal, to help kids be able to get justice, to be able to set a child in a position where they have somebody, anybody, to listen to them, to hear them, to take care of them and their needs. So are we listening to kids? Are we asking the right questions? Are we available for children? Are we making sure that children have access to the people in their lives that they need to make a difference? And that includes therapeutic intervention. So many of our kids, they have mental health issues. They have emerging social, emotional, and behavioral delays at very young ages, and we know this. So how are we making sure that our kids in the foster care system are getting the attention, the mental health services, and the support and justice that they need?
Okay, thank you very much. And speaking of foster care, we do have a display here by the Hart Gallery and by the Guardian Ad Litem program that all of you might want to take a look at too, because they're very important for foster care issues. So April, how does your work at Directions for Living, how do you integrate trauma-informed care when working with children or families in high-risk situations?
You know, we started back in 2012 with a rebranding of the organization. We went from a name that people had known us for forever, which was Directions for Mental Health, to Directions for Living. And we did that really with the understanding of ACEs and understanding that adverse childhood experience and this dose relationship that Dr. Negrini has referenced is really important, in that we needed to be providing services through that lens, quite frankly, and we developed 5 promises that we offer to all of the clients that we serve, starting with that we make you our first priority, we listen to your story, we protect your privacy, and those types of promises that we want to kind of understand that trauma and the dose relationship it being so important, but really then understanding resilience and understanding resiliency, and that while we all probably have an ACE score, by the way, the research suggests that all of us have an ACE score. Very few of us have an ACE score of 0. The majority of us have an ACE score of somewhere between 2 and 4. Obviously, the higher the ACE score, the higher the likelihood is for some of the things that Dr. Negrini referenced. But what we also know is that there is an antidote to trauma. There's an antidote to traumatic experiences, and the antidote is resiliency and development of resiliency skills and treatment and emotional support and all the other things that you can think of. And so at Directions for Living, we have developed all of our programming through that lens, which is that treatment works. We know that treatment works. Not everybody needs treatment. Not everybody needs a diagnosis. We have many programs that don't require that. But we know that treatment works. We know that life can get better, that people can heal from their prior childhood trauma histories and go on to live beautiful, healthy, fulfilling, wonderful, wonderful lives. And that's what we want for our community. It's what we want for our children, and certainly what we want for our families.
Well, it sounds like you're doing that already, and that's great. And the ACEs, you can Google ACEs and get the test. It's a 10-question test. And when I was a juvenile judge, I gave it to the kids in the juvenile detention center, and their scores were 7, 8, 9, understandably. I also gave it to the kids when I taught at Stetson Law School, and their scores were 1, 2, so it kind of just explains itself in that way. Let's see, Judge Moore, who is our chief judge of the Unified Family Court, and you see kids and parents and guardians and foster parents, social workers. Okay. So can you, Judge Moore, tell us as the chief judge how you balance the need for legal action with the need to ensure emotional well-being of the children in your court proceedings?
Good afternoon. First of all, I do dependency and delinquency, but I want to keep it to dependency if I could, just because the title of the forum today.
Sure.
And so how do I balance that? One, the Florida Supreme Court has stated that they would like for every child to have not only a guardian ad litem attorney, but an attorney ad litem, but we can't make that happen. So thanks to the guardian ad litem's program, every child now has at least a guardian ad litem. And so with having the guardian ad litem on the case, at least that we know that their voices will be heard for the best interest of the child. But we need to make sure when they're coming in that they are properly evaluated, because, as stated before, once you take a child out of their home, trauma has begun. And so my interest sometimes is not necessarily the same as what the children want to do for me, because a lot of times they want to go home. They want to go back to where it is that they came from, even though it is not safe. And so the balance there is to want to listen to them and let them know that they have a voice, but to also let them know that just because you ask for it doesn't mean that I can give it to you at this time, that we are working to get to where it is that you want to be, if we could get there, but I can't always give you what you want. I think it's very important, one, for kids to be heard. A lot of times when they think that they want to be heard, or they tell the guardian ad litem that they want to be heard, and then when they come to court, the form is such that maybe not so much. So usually the protocol is to either take them in the back, or now that we're in the new fancy courthouse, we can take them to a new room that's off to the side to have conversations with them. And usually what I do is I let them talk to me. I don't ask questions because I don't want it to be said that I am influencing them. And they usually get to come back with their volunteer guardian and or a case manager so that at least they could, get it off their chest. What I find out is at least if they're heard. Not always that you can wave your magic wand and make it happen, but most kids just want to be heard. They want to know that you hear them. Now, the guardians, they're put in a strange position because sometimes the kids want things that are not in their best interests. So that's why an attorney ad litem is necessary, so that I could get to hear the crazy stuff it is that they want, even if we're not going to give it to them, so that their voice is really heard. But I think it's most important to make sure that when they come into care, they're being seen, that they're getting their CBHAs, they're getting those clinical behavioral assessments so that we know what type of services that are needed. And it's important to make sure that the case management agencies are getting them the counseling that is necessary based upon the evaluations.
Thank you, and thanks for distinguishing the difference between a guardian ad litem and attorney ad litem for the child. Okay, Mr. Walker, Bill Walker, you're here not only because of your experience in court with children, but also because you see them in non-court settings as a longtime diving coach in St. Petersburg. Okay, so Mr. Walker, can you tell us what is your approach to listening to kids in both those settings?
There are lots of settings. Can you hear me? Everybody okay? Good, okay. As a coach, I've been a diving coach for 50 years, and literally I've got a picture in my office of myself with my team at Northeast High School, and the date is 1975 on the picture. So I've been doing this a long time. In the course of that, of course, my gosh, the variety of children that I've dealt with, the vast majority of athletes in high school and such, pretty much they're pretty much okay. But there are those that I do run into. Ironically, I'm sitting up here with a group of absolutely wonderful, loving, caring, and deeply knowledgeable, highly knowledgeable people about what to do. As a coach, I'm prohibited by law from doing anything. If I determine or if I see a suspicion level, that's the trigger. If I have a suspicion a child is being abused at home, I can do nothing. All I can do is call the people in Tallahassee, call the local police department, and call other folks. I can't investigate. I can't talk to the kid. I can't do this. I can't do that. We're not permitted to do it. And that's a good reason, by the way, because this kind of thing is super delicate, and if you're not trained and you don't have a clue what you're doing, then you can obviously do a lot more harm than good if you try to be somebody that you're not. Now, in answering to the question, I totally agree with the idea that children must be listened to. When I'm training a kid, the worst thing in the world I can do is the kid will tell me something or a reason why they can't do this or that or be at practice or whatever, and I don't believe them. Nothing will separate a kid and at least a coach any quicker than that. If the kid doesn't think you believe them, and it's got to be real. Yes, there are kids who tell things that are not quite true. You got to deal with that. But the way I deal with it is I listen to the kid, and I don't interrupt the kid. I don't do I don't do any of that stuff. I'm not listening on my phone. I'm not playing with my phone. I'm not doing any of that stuff. When you're talking to the kid is your focus. It's the only thing that should be on your mind, the only thing that should be on in your hand or whatever. and you listen to the children, once they get something off of their chest, it's kind of it's quite a change in the child's attitude. So, at least in my experience, the big part is to listen. And the second part is work with the child on the solution of the problem. Now, it can be a teammate is doing something wrong. Honest to gosh, one time my policy was to allow my kids who have most are girls, by the way. So she's got a boyfriend, and the boyfriend brings her to class, brings her to practice. Sometimes he'd walk in, he'd say a practice and whatnot, and I let him do that because he was providing her a ride to come. Well, one day he dumped her. Not only did he dump her, but he started dating another diver on my team.
Oh, gosh.
Just imagine how that reacted. Okay? So I kind of had to get everybody around together and let them know that I am your coach. I am here to teach you how to do a somewhat challenging, and some people think dangerous, although it's not, sport. I need your attention. I do not need drama or any of these other things going on. So I told the boyfriend, if you want to provide rides to kids, I can't, that's not me. I'm not part of that. That's up to parents, not me. But this pool deck is mine, and the boyfriend will not be on this pool deck again. My purpose there was to put the weight of the problem on the kid who created it, and not to get into the kids' minds who had nothing to do with it, really, other than just being stupid and you know, starting to fall for a guy who just dumped your friend, your teammate. Really, gosh, come on. Then I've had other circumstances where a child was, in fact, it turned out, being abused. She had gotten with another coach, and they had run around, and that coach did not abuse her at all. He was basically a guy who could listen to her. I counseled him later not to do that because, again, we're not permitted by law to do it. But on the other hand, call the right people. Then she came to me, and I explained to her the situation. This is the third part, I think. When you have to do something with a child, this is what I've done. I'm advising experts here, right? But when you're with the child and they bring a problem to you, if you can't work and solve it, like Judge was talking about, but if you can't work and solve it, you'd be surprised how well it works if you just explain that to the child. I'm a coach. I'm responsible for you. This is a problem that is outside of the scope of my abilities, outside of anything I can do for you. But what I am going to do is to call people who can help you. And I really want you to listen to them because they're going to get in touch with you. And it worked. It worked very well. It worked for her. Okay, it might not work for 100 people. I don't know, but for 100 kids. But it worked very well for her to understand that I'm part of the solution, but I can't be part of actually solving it. But I will get her there. The biggest thing, of course, was the long period of time when she explained what was going on. And I said, don't stop. I try to stop her all the time. Just keep talking. But the fact is that these things do happen in my diving business. No, it's not really a business. I'm a volunteer. But they happen in my diving. Almost everything that these people are talking about, I've dealt with in the last 50 years with these kids. And I try to handle it as carefully as I can. But the big thing, getting back to the listening, listen to kids, don't cut them off, let them talk all they want, and be actually interested. You listen to a kid and you're doing this.
Well,
you
you raised a very good point, Bill, that if you can't solve it, you can explain to them why. And I think that's very good. A lot of people just think if they can't solve it, goodbye. you know.
Yeah, you think, well,
So
it's not my job, right? Not my
Let me
job.
talk to Dina Hernandez, who's the Executive Director of PACE Center for Girls. I'm a huge fan of PACE Center for Girls in Pinellas. So tell us how girls are different and what, if anything, you have to do differently when you're listening to girls.
Thank you. So with the youth that we serve, or the girls particularly that we serve here in the community, our girls come to us and, you know, we always say at risk, but I like to say more so at promise. There is hope for our young ladies, and we know that we are providing them the tools and the resources that they need to be successful in the community. And to start by that, most of the girls that attend PACE Center have to have at least 3 of our 5 ACEs that we go by. And with this means that the girls may have some type of abuse, neglect, or just unstable home environments, which we know as a community that can lead to behavioral struggles, right? They don't care about education, their disengagement, and then also sometimes the girls that we serve have a possible run-in with the juvenile justice system, maybe truancy or other things that have gotten them there. To better support these girls, we need to have active listening. It's so important to hear them and to hear them without judgment, right? To truly sit down and listen to what they have to say and give them a voice so they feel valued and understood. We take that approach at PACE, and it goes miles. And not only my counselors, but my leadership team, my academic team, we all take that approach with the girls. We actively listen, and it's amazing what you will get from that just by building that rapport and that relationship with them, that they feel they can trust you and you're providing a safe environment for them to share. On top of that, one thing that we do at PACE is we have a holistic approach. We do strength-based holistic approach, which allows for us to not only offer academic services, but we also offer counseling to our girls on a regular basis, where they're meeting with a counselor basically at any time that they may need. We know a lot of children today are struggling with mental health and other issues, and they may not get that in a class where they have 30 to 32 students. Our girls are in a ratio of less than 12 girls per class. So they're getting that one-on-one with not only an academic instructor, or teacher, I should say, but also a counselor that can meet with them when they're having a struggle or a bad day or something's going on at home that they need to come in and discuss and talk about. And with that, we also provide life skills training. So we're not sending them back into the community to repeat some behaviors that they may have had earlier. We're working with them to teach them what they need to do. What are other choices they have? What can they do to change that behavior? We have a behavior modification program that helps each girl succeed in our program, and to show them that there are choices that they may have or take that goes along with their behavior. By actively listening and personalizing our interventions to each girl and making them each feel unique, we can empower these girls to break the cycle of adversity and build brighter futures. And that's what we do at PACE.
Okay, thank you. Judge Hillinger, back to you. I've often heard you talk about the difference between a judge calling the balls and strikes and a judge applying therapeutic justice. Can you give us a nutshell kind of description of that difference?
Do I have 1 or 2 hours?
2 nutshells.
2 hours. Okay. Yeah, the family division, again, from this Florida Supreme Court case, has grown away from just calling the balls and strikes. Now, we still do that occasionally. I was in trial all day today. But we try to avoid families ever getting to that. We try to understand their issues. We try to understand their family dynamics. We try to have our radar up if there is trauma. And it's not in every house that comes before us, but it's in a lot of houses. And as I like to say, if we miss the trauma, we've missed the case. We've missed the case. And then we'll do some judgment and send them on their way. And the hellhole that these people have been living in was more than likely to continue, and the futures will be horrible. So I'm going to answer this in 2 basic ways. And the first is education, okay? And for most of us, it's everything we didn't learn about in life growing up We had decent upbringings. We didn't learn in college. We didn't learn in law school. We didn't learn in our first jobs. And the more we get involved in the family law division, the more we realize we have to understand these things. Because if we don't, we've helped perpetrate the damage being done. So it's education, and not just judges, but it's the lawyers. It's the caseworkers. It's anybody in the community. It's teachers. So if a kid's having a bad day, it's not bad, go sit in the corner and make the kid feel worse. It's, hey, what's going on? What's happening? And then you have a rational discussion. It's coaches. It's everybody in the system. It's police officers. If we learn about these things called adverse childhood experiences, and I call it trauma in the big issue, then we'll be in a much better position to try to help people get to a better place. And the next, and then I will move on. We're all in this big thing together when a family is in trouble. And if anybody thinks the big bad judge can enter an order or a judgment and then everybody abides by it and everything gets better, they're living in Gaga land. Okay? It's not the way it works. So what we need to be able to do is, when we have this in our cases, that hopefully everybody understands it. The judge is a trauma-informed judge. The lawyers are not just being advocates and regurgitating what their abusive client wants. Okay? But they're trying to problem solve and get better. And we know the resources in the community that we can send the people to get the resilience that the studies have showed that they can. So we all need to form partnerships. It was mentioned, our travels and all, and that was a big part of it. It was not only education, but these conferences were for people in the court system, they were for the lawyers, and they were for the psychologicals and the resources in the community, and form working partnerships to help these families get to a better place. That's what we're trying to do in family court. We're better at it than we used to be, but we still got a long way to go.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Negrini, families are different now than they were, obviously, 10, 20, 50 years ago now. And at the end of my service as a juvenile judge, you know, we had children born from one-night stands, or children born whose mothers couldn't identify whom the father might be. So in these kind of situations, how can you help children with the therapeutic justice that you advocate?
I think trauma-informed care and, therapeutic intervention is really important. The beginning part of that is really listening, and not just listening to words, because children aren't always ready to talk about it, or they don't have the language. They're not able to talk about it. So are we listening to their behavior? Are we listening to their feelings? Are we paying attention to the physical impact of stress on their systems, whether it's asthma or ADHD? Like, are we really listening to what's going on with a child and paying attention and noticing? Because our little kids, our little ones, are in desperate need of support. They can't always tell us what's going on, what's happening. And so us asking is not always going to give us the answers we're looking for, but paying attention to behavior, making referrals for clinical intervention, for mental health counseling, for family systems work, and making sure that we've got kids who have the support of adults in their life besides their primary caretakers. So that's everybody in the child welfare system, in the judicial system, the mental health community. There are lots of people that are paying attention. And so referrals from schools, from early learning settings, from all of the walks of life, whether that's sports, but really everywhere that a child goes, where you're seeing behaviors, where you're seeing the expression of deep feelings of pain, of rage, anger, kids who are attempting suicide, kids who are telling us, right, and asking us to listen, but not to their words. They're showing us with their behavior. So really paying attention to what's going on, and are we making that connection with trauma-informed services to make sure that our kids are okay.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lott, at Directions for Living, do you have any of the constraints that Mr. Walker talked about not being able to fully talk with your children? Can you explain the difference? Right.
Yes, we do not have those constraints. Certainly, we have to inform all of the people that we are working with and speaking to that if they share certain details of abuse and neglect, that we would be a mandatory reporter and that we would have to call that in. But generally speaking, no, we don't have those constraints. I will say our second promise, right, which is listening to your story, and just in the spirit of listening to kids in foster care, there really is a lot of science on what the therapeutic impact of simply listening to someone tell you their story is. Some of the research is showing even with a coach, with a neighbor, with their physician, their pediatrician, or a counselor, but it does not have to be a professional necessarily, listening to their story can literally decrease the amount of time that they need to spend with a physician, with going to a doctor. That just the therapeutic or cathartic process of telling their story, which is why our second promise at Directions for Living is in fact listening to your story. The other thing I want to say, though, is that the only way to keep children safe, in my opinion, is through their parents. And so we have to get comfortable working with parents who are abusive, perhaps, who are not making good parenting choices and good parenting decisions, perhaps who don't know how to good parent, who were once children. All parents were once 4 years old. They were once children. And the only way to keep children safe is through their parents, which means that we really need to be committed. If we're committed to children, if we're committed to protecting and serving children, we need to be committed to serving their parents and understanding ACE. I hear a lot of people talking about ACE. And even using adverse childhood experiences and trauma-informed care, all these words. And I'm telling you, I can look at you in 5 minutes and know if you really understand ACE and if you understand trauma-informed care. Because I hear us talking about trauma-informed care in a lot of places, and then I watch us do the opposite of trauma-informed care. And so I think it's important just to make a couple points about listening and just the therapeutic value, the cathartic value of listening to children. Quite frankly, even listening to adults. Many of you probably, am I still on? Have heard, I would like to even do a show of hands, how many of you have talked to a parent or a child who has said something like this: "You're the first person I've ever told. Show me who you are. You're the first person I ever told," right? And so we know that sometimes even adults have not shared their painful trauma histories and their stories of adverse childhood experiences, and sometimes literally getting them to a place where they feel safe to be able to talk about those experiences can make all the difference in the world in helping them to protect and keep children safe. And just to use a kind of modified version of what Judge Sullivan said at the very beginning, we too have a practice in wraparound care, but it's nothing about you without you. And so it really is, right? Everything that we are doing is including the parent and the child and everybody who's a part of that child or that parent's life and journey, right, to health and wellness and resiliency.
Thank you. Judge Moore, you're not only the chief of the Unified Family Court, but I think you've been there about 15 years now? 14 years now. So I'd like to ask you if you have a perspective if things have changed for families in stress, families in your court, kids in foster care, over those 14 years.
I can tell you what has changed. When I started out, I came from the Public Defender's Office, and I was in the crossover division. And that is where, for people that don't know, where you represent a child that is in dependency court as well as juvenile court. And I remember being one of the first crossover attorneys, and the fight that we had to have a seat at the table. The fight that we had to have in order to represent the children that were coming into court. Now that relationship is much easier for the crossover attorneys, and I think it is necessary to have the crossover attorneys because that way the children get their voice in delinquency court as well, because your book title is is not lost on me. This book title is not lost on me. Having one judge for one family is great, because as judges in the unified family court system, I know what's going on with the child in dependency court. I know the trauma, I know the drama, I know all of that. But guess who don't know? The state attorneys in my delinquency division does not know, because they're not the dependency attorneys. So it is good that somebody besides that child's attorney, that they know what's going on. And I think that is a great system to have. Now, the family drama is the same. The trauma is the same. And Judge Sullivan, we still have the one-night stands. Nothing's changed about that. So all of that is still going on. But what I think is happening is I think that we're all working together now to try to, one, better the outcome for the children. And Ms. Lott, I think you're so right. We have to work with the parents, because guess what? I've been at that courthouse long enough to, one, see the children now come through as parents. They have now come through my court as parents. And I represented some of the kids as their crossover attorney. Now they're with me as families. And and my heart aches when we get to TPR, because guess what? We raised that child. That child didn't get adopted. That child aged out of the system. So what does that say about the system as a parent? That we don't parent very well. We do the best that we can with what we have. So I agree with you. We need to try to work with the parents to try to give them what they need so that they can be reunified. And when all else fails, I know that we have to get to adoption. But I think that we should remember, when we are having kids that age, when they're aging out, the services that they need, because we can only give them so much. But the reality of the situation is this, that as a system, we can't give them that low. We can't give them the little things that it is that they needed, and they may have the best volunteer guardians in the world, but even that guardian has to go home at night. Even that guardian has other kids on his or her caseload. And so we don't do the best with raising children, but we're doing way better than we were when I first started 14 years ago. So I do think that there has been a change.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Walker, okay, as a diving coach, and without naming any names, suppose you have a very talented diver, a teenager, a woman or a young woman or a young man, but who's kind of resistant to the rules or your instruction. How do you break through that kind of barrier to get him or her to listen to you?
Okay, there are lots of ways that a child can do that. All I know is the world of sports. That's what I know. And you're right. There are children like that, and it doesn't matter whether they're talented. Frankly, a lot of talented kids don't want to work so hard because they can jump up on the board. No, this is easy, piece of cake to do, back dive or whatever. And then you got another kid who's got very, very, not a whole heck of a lot of talent, but this kid is determined, and this kid is going to do it, and they are ready to work. So you've got that whole gamut there. And this problem comes up with all kinds of sports, or at least all kinds of kids. And what, at least what I try to do, and again, I feel like I'm talking to experts here, and it's kind of you guys to smile for me. It really is. But first, I try to figure out. Just watching the child and try to figure out, why is this kid doing that? What is there about this particular rule that says don't do this, and you're going, but the kid will do it? And once I try to figure that out, if I can, then of course, eventually I do sit down and talk to the child and let them know that there are certain things we have to do. We don't have any choice. This is what they have to do, and I'm your coach, and I need your help, because if you're not going to do that, then you're affecting the whole team. You're affecting the whole team. And it includes just the rules, actual dive rules, as well as rules of etiquette. Rules of Safe Sport, which is the organization with the U.S. Olympic Committee that runs the whole national situation on any kind of child abuse or improper conduct. And so you got to try to figure out, at least I try to figure out, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you picking on one of the divers? If it gets too far, then you get to bullying, and that's prohibited by Safe Sport. And what's going on here? Because you're not bullying the kid because it's fun. You're doing this for a reason. And what is the reason? So oddly enough, you can't really ask them directly. You kind of got to talk to them about it. Eventually, at least in my experience, if you talk to them long enough, the truth will come out. The truth will come out. But you just got to talk to them for a while. That's really what I try to do. Now, yes, there are people, there have been children that the answer is just no. Period. I'm going to do what I want. I've had children who came in and used a lot of explicit language. Explicit language, you guys probably all know, is the use of really bad words. F word, S word, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, all those words, okay? None of my kids use any expletive, any of that kind of language on my team at all. And, of course, I don't, and I just don't permit any of that at all. And I don't have any problem, except once in a while I'll get a kid that's he's just going to do it. So I'll let him know a couple times, and then I'll suspend him for a couple days and let him come back. And eventually, if he continues to do that, then he's off the team. Because I can't, if you let one child on a team, and this is kind of a different thing because you all have individual kids that aren't necessarily united together. I assure you a team is united together. And so you've got to watch that aspect of it. But anyway, I do everything I can do, and I make sure that the child understands that nobody else is doing this. Nobody else is using these words. And why are you? And then I'll try to do it blunt. I'll go run the block. What is it? You don't know another word that you can use for this or another way to say it. So I use all these different approaches to it. But unfortunately, I have to remove the kid from the team if they keep doing it. And when I do, the other kids are relieved. They really are. It's amazing how relieved they are. They don't generally ask me to do it. In fact, I don't remember that any kid did that. That any kid has asked me to remove another kid. But eventually you do, and that's hard. I've done that. I can remember in these years I've done it. I can remember 3 kids that I've actually removed for behavior, and some of it's been pretty bold. So you've just got to remove them because I've got responsibilities to other kids.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go on to Ms. Hernandez now. When I first told my friends that I was involved with PACE, and girls were there who had problems at home or for credit recovery or problems in a normal classroom and so on, they said, oh my gosh, the whole bunch of girls like that with those problems. How could they get along with each other? So how do you listen to the complaints they might have about each other at a place like PACE?
It's funny you say that. I always say every day is a different day. Working with young ladies from the ages of 11 to 17, and 52 of them at one time is quite extravagant. So with that, with having different behaviors, right, everybody's in there for different reasons. They're attending PACE for their own reason, and they're all unique. But the one thing that I always say is we start off by listening to each girl and learning who she is as an individual, not as a group. We validate their feelings. We ensure that they have a voice. And then we also work with providing them coping skills and strategies onto how to manage maybe if they have anger issues or things like that. We work with them. We give them devices, or we tell them, if you know that you're getting upset about something, this is what we can do. They know to notify the staff immediately, and staff notifies their counselor. Their counselor comes in and, removes them from the room, so there is nothing that will happen at that moment. And for that girl, that is a great moment because she's recognizing that she's starting to get elevated. And instead of reacting like she would in some instances where maybe she was at her previous school and she got into an altercation with another student, she recognizes that and she's like, I can't do this. I need to let someone know that I'm being heightened. My emotions are up, but I need to be removed so I can calm down for a moment and then go back to the class. And we have that quite often, but I really value those young women because for them to recognize that, I think that's the first step, and that is huge for them. So we always value that. And the other thing is, working with them together and teaching them peer mediation. We do a lot of peer groups and things like that, so girls know how to share their emotions and their feelings with one another. And then just also, to be honest with you, having structure in the classroom. The big thing is structure, having expectations and them knowing those rules and those roles when they sit down so they know what's expected of them. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of our star-studded panelists. Can we have a big hand for them first? And then Kim has some questions from the audience. We'll let you take over, Kim.
Thank you. We promise not to keep you too much longer. We have about 3 questions, but if you all have any as we're asking, please feel free to flag down one of our team members and they'll take it. Judge Moore, this one is for you specifically. How do you balance giving parents 1 to 3 years to complete their case plan and children in the foster system more years?
It is a tough balance because I am a believer that everyone can change. But I am also, once I took my oath, I also agreed to follow the law. And so it doesn't matter what I think personally, I will always follow the law. But what I do find that if you encourage the parent as much as you encourage the child, that if they're going to get it done, they will get it done quicker than the 3-year balance. There have been some cases that I wonder why are we still doing this, because it has taken a long time. But I trust the state attorneys when they make the decision not to get to TPR, because usually, at least in Section 5, usually they won't bring a case that they don't think that they can win. Mm-hmm. They don't think that, it's ripe yet. And so what happens is this: I know that the kids need what we call permanency. I can't make the state do anything. I can't make them file. The guardian ad litem can file. Anybody else could file, but Judge Moore can't file. And so the balance is, it is very tough for me when I know that a child needs to be in a place that he or she can, one, call home and not have to worry about coming to court for 3 years in a row, but at the same time, that parent does have constitutional rights as well. Mm-hmm. And so it is always a tough balance. And so at the end of the day, if we get to TPR, I don't know who cries more at the adoption or who, or excels more at the adoption, me and or the adoptive family, or who rejoices at reunification, me and or the parents. Because it is always tough. It is not an easy answer. It is always easy to Monday morning quarterback and say, I would do it different, until you actually sit in my spot.
Mm-hmm. So there's a follow-up question for you. With the proliferation of group homes, younger children are in these settings. Is there concern about placing young children in group homes?
Yes. Oh, thank you for that question. A lot of damage happens in group homes. I have kids that have been abused more in group homes than they have been in the places that we have taken them from. And so we have to be very careful when we're placing kids in group homes, because sometimes the younger kids are getting bullied by the older kids. I don't know if it's like a rite of passage thing that goes on in these group homes. But what happens is, I think that we have a lot of group homes where the staffs, well-intended. But guess what? You're dealing with kids that have severe issues. So think about it. Not just one child. You're talking about 10, 15 kids. All of these kids have issues. What is your patience like with these children? And a lot of abuse happens, and these kids are told, who are you going to believe? Who are they going to believe, me or the child with the problem? Mm-hmm. And so many kids have been abused in group homes, and it has gone unrecognized until they get that one person that believes them, that one person that will believe them and take heed. Now, not every group home is bad, so let me just make sure I preface that to any group homes that are listening. But we do have a lot of group homes where, it is no better than the home that we took them from. But again, it is a system. And this is why I say, we as a system, we don't do real good at raising children, because our hands are tied. I would love for there to be, traditional homes that we can put our kids in, but unfortunately for our teenagers, they end up in group homes. A lot end up in group homes.
Does anyone else want to add before? No? Okay. Couple of other questions for the entire panel. The case management in foster care, what can be done to improve the quality of this program? like. I wish we could take pictures to show you right away what you look like. April, you
Yeah,
can-
that's a loaded question, and hard to answer. You know, I was talking to a member of the leadership team of a case management organization, actually on my way here tonight, and she was sitting on the side of the road sobbing because she had just driven 45 minutes one way to take a child who had been diagnosed with autism, who's in foster care, to the foster home. And 5 minutes after she got back on the road to go home, the foster family called and said, "You got to come get the child." And the child is only allowed to be there from basically 6 at night till 6 in the morning, and has to be, so it's overnights only. So, you know, when you think about case management, and what I said to her, and this is a member of the leadership team, quite frankly, not even, you know, a entry level, what I call baby case manager. She's not a baby case manager. She's been in these roles for a very, very long time, and yet she's sitting on the side of the road tonight, sobbing about this baby and about where she's going to take this child and how hard this is. She's exhausted. And, you know, and what I said to her is what I would, you know, I don't know if I'm answering the question necessarily, but to say that, you know, the system is flawed. It's designed flawed. It's got design flaws. And so sometimes the system is working exactly the way it is designed to work, which is flawed. And so we can keep turning over case managers, and we can keep turning over case management organizations, and we can keep turning over all of the things, and allowing them to believe that they're the problem, and not look at the system, how the system is designed. And so as long as we have, and we may have foster parents listening, we may have foster parents in the room, and I mean no disrespect to our foster parents who we could not do this work without. What I will say, however, is as long as we have a system that says to foster parents that you only have to have them from 10 at night until 5 in the morning, you don't have to keep them overnight. As long as we are allowing foster parents, for example, to 10 minutes after they're dropped off because of a behavior, we have to call a case manager and you have to come get them. As long as we have those systems in place, and we do, it will continue to be a struggle. You know, I want to say to everybody in the room, right, how many of you are foster parents? We all, if the design is that we get to remove everybody's kids, and that we aren't going to provide the intensity of the services that are needed in homes, then all of us in this room and everybody listening needs to take 8, a minimum of 8. And unless you have 8 children in your home under foster care, right, we're probably nowhere near where we need to be. And so, you know, what can we do to improve the system? I think we have to have really hard conversations about the design of the system. And be prepared to have very hard, frank conversations about philosophical beliefs about parents, and about, you know, where kids need to be and should be. And there's so many questions that we would need to tackle. I agree with the question that improvement needs to be made in a variety of ways. I also agree that at times it is, in fact, an individual professional who is not behaving in a professional manner. But the vast majority of the time, the job is simply unsustainable, and we have to address those issues.
Well, this is another personal one that I think will sort of dovetail into what you've already said, but respectfully, this question is, as a survivor of childhood abuse and nearly going into a foster care system but was denied due to current or the existing loopholes in the law, and then ultimately results in the ascension of the child being removed from a dangerous situation and the continued abuse, what can we as policymakers do to ensure that services can be delivered effectively? I know these are hard questions. Thank you.
These are impossible questions, but I think this is the right forum to bring them up and to discuss them. As April said, it's a systems problem, and what we really need is a redesign that really entails reprioritizing children and families putting more money into the system for prevention and support, making sure that we're investing in mental health and substance abuse and domestic violence services, and really putting an effort in as a society to voice what's important to us and how important our children are and how important it is that we do right by them. And I think I kept thinking while April was talking, it's money. It's money, right? There's not enough money to redesign the system the way it needs to be redesigned, and to be able to put an emphasis on earlier prevention and intervention services to strengthen families and build resiliency culturally across our culture. We have a lot of work to do.
Thank you.
Can I also say, though,
Yes.
to that question is that, because I think if I understand the question correctly, is that somebody's question is that their experience is that they were left in an abusive home and they remained in that abusive home and they were unable, right, to get the support and services that they need. Again, I think it goes to the listening to kids in foster care. There really are homes where monsters are real and terrible things are truly happening. And in those cases, we really should be, in fact, listening to children and removing them from those situations. I will tell you, I started as a child protective investigator right here in Pinellas County. Back when dependency and delinquency were still together. It was a very, very different system back then. I worked for HRS. And what I will tell you is that if you've never removed a child, removing children is a very, very difficult thing. I've never, in fact, removed a child that didn't cry and sob and weep and ask to go back to the home where we were removing them from. With that, and it's a very traumatic. It's traumatic for the individual who's removing that child. It's traumatic for the child. It's traumatic for everybody. With that said, we certainly know that there are situations where monsters are real and terrible, terrible things are in fact happening. And we've all heard those stories, and they aren't often as unique as you might think they are. And so for whoever asked that question, I just want to say to you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that the system failed you. I'm sorry that we didn't hear you and we didn't listen to you. And you are correct, right? We need to have a pathway in a way that we can distinguish and differentiate between the two, whether it's taken 3 years or it's a year. But this system is not perfect to that question's point. And I'm sorry that we failed.
Thank you. There's one story to share, and then we'll do the last question.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
The old adage, pay me now or pay me later. If the system would put more money in up front to deal with this, then we wouldn't need as many prisons. We need some prisons, don't get me wrong, but there wouldn't need as many in a lot of these people. And also, in my experience, I have not really seen or heard of people that were born evil. Evil and bad behavior is generally learned behavior, and most of that is from trauma that they experienced in their youth. And then this becomes so phenomenally generational. So, yes, we need to just continue to work and work and work and try. And every time we can help a family, then we've probably kept somebody out of prison or drug abuse or an early death or whatever. So it's frustrating, it's challenging, it can break our hearts, but it's a beautiful thing when it works. Really a neat thing.
Yeah. I think Judge wanted to add a story.
I have one story that happened when I was at National Adoption Day in Florida, Pinellas County Adoption Day, and there's a little guy sitting in the front row with his case manager. He was not being adopted, but he told his case manager he wanted to come to tell his story. So I asked the case manager if she thought it was okay, and she said, yes, he really wants to. So he got up in front of a full packed courtroom of people, kids and adults and case managers and so on, and he was about 11 years old. I think his name was Henry. And he said, I want to say what happened to me. And it illustrates what happens to these foster kids. He said that on a Saturday, he was told by his foster mom that a family wanted to meet him. So he said the dad came to pick me up about 10 in the morning with the 2 boys. And I sat in front with the dad, and the two boys sat in the back, and we all got along and were talking and, having fun. And when we got to the home, the mom fixed a lunch, and it was really good food. And then we went out and played in the yard, kicked a soccer ball around in that. And I was getting a little hungry, and I was wondering, how soon it was going to be for dinner, because I was supposed to stay for dinner. And all of a sudden, the dad came out again, and he said, "I'm taking you home, back to your foster home." So he got in the car with the dad. The dad made him sit in the back, so he didn't sit in the front. The two other boys didn't come. And the dad took him back without saying anything to him to the foster home. And the dad had given him a Tampa Bay Rays baseball hat when he had picked him up earlier that morning. So when he dropped him off at the foster home, the dad turned to Henry and said, "You have to give me back that Tampa Bay Rays hat." Isn't that shocking? The people in the courtroom just gasped when he told that story. And then a lady who was sitting right near the front stood up and said, "Henry, that family didn't deserve you. Another family will." And he was adopted a year later. But isn't that something what they have to go through? It's like when you pick up a cat or dog and you want to try it out or something. So anyway, thanks to our wonderful panel here. Let's give them another big hand. I thought it was excellent. Excellent. I could see you learning from each other, too. How about that? Okay, Kim?
Yep, I'm going to wrap up. As I wrap up, there was one other question, and that is, how do you help the people who cannot express themselves, people who have disabilities, people who are challenged in the system? How do you listen to them when they have challenges?
There are lots of therapeutic interventions where speech is not required. And so we have expressive therapies like art therapy, play therapy, we have music therapy. There are lots of ways for us to get out feelings and to learn how to regulate. We do yoga and calming and deep breathing, meditation and mindfulness. And so there are many ways to help people who don't have the language or the words, or because they have limited cognitive functioning, they can't talk it out or tell their stories, but we can still validate what they've been through, give it a voice, right? The therapist can give it a voice for them, and we can help them process that through other modes of communication.
Thank you. Judge Moore, do you have anything to add?
I was basically going to follow up. Usually in care, they'll get a special needs attorney, and they'll do the ABA therapy, the play therapy, and all of that. It is very difficult when they don't have that voice, so to speak, and so you can't really hear what's inside and really what they need to tell you. But I think those therapies are so important so that they do get the relief.
Thank you.
And we look at it from the child's standpoint, not our standpoint, all right? And try to understand the child and then reach something when it comes to mind. 25 years ago, I'm guardian ad litem in a very high conflict case, and the kid was a baseball player, about 8 years old. And I played a lot of baseball in my life. I took him to a baseball field, and I threw the baseball with him for about half an hour. And then we sat down and talked. So we have to understand the kids rather than where we think is right.
Thank you all for your expertise. I think we can all agree this was a very in conversation time. We're going to wrap up and want to mention that there are partners here that I want to acknowledge for their time today. And the partners include, and they have a table in the back. Just want to read off. We have the Heart Gallery, which connects children in the foster care with their forever families through adoption. In addition to featuring children, they recruit and support families interested in adoption. We also have the Family Support Services and the lead agency for Pasco and Pinellas County. Their goal is to reunify families whenever possible. Although they recognize it's not always possible, they seek to secure permanency when they can. Their goal is to create relationships for children intended to last for a lifetime. And then finally, we have the Florida Guardian Ad Litem Office representative for abandoned and abused and neglected children in the court. Their multidisciplinary team provides quality legal representation in Florida's most vulnerable children. And then off to the remainder of our program, we invite you, again, our programs, we have a lot of them. We hope that you will connect with us and learn a little bit more about what we do. Our next program are with the Beach Mayors. They are a strong conglomerate. They went through a really tough year, as we all have, for Floridians, so we're going to have a town hall with them. The next time after that, we're going to have a beach cleanup. Welcome to join or share if it's something that you're passionate about but can't physically do. And then finally, we just invite you to learn a little bit more about Congressman Young. I think that everyone knows him. We took the time to do a small documentary to express why he created the Institute, because it's always a question we receive. And then our last slide is to connect with us. Please follow us in any way that you see fit. Yes, I have my team members telling me I have 2 other things to say. To see however you see fit to connect with us. We have food in the back, so we hope that you stay and talk to each other to answer some of the questions you didn't get to engage in. And finally, if you'd like to provide sponsorships for any of our programs, we welcome that. The programs are very nominal to us, but they're important. You see the depth of and range of conversations we have. We love to give a more intergenerational space with more students, but we would appreciate it if you're interested to take an envelope on your way out. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Judge.